some of whom had come over mountains to get to the hospital. A few memorable patients had sold parts of their farmland so they could afford to just make the journey to come to a hospital. Quite a few had gone from a local healer to a health post to a hospital, and finally arrived at my desk. And that made me think, I'm not going to get this kind of opportunity working at Krauss Memorial Hospital. So I stayed from 4 months to a year. I topped it up. And during that year, I was posted to a hospital in the mountains. And at that hospital, a number of things happened to me. I became a Christian. So I went to a Nepal mission hospital and converted. That's what you're supposed to do, but it's not supposed to be the American who converts. Also at that hospital, I met patients like this fella who came in with tuberculosis, brought in by his father, carried into the hospital in a basket. And then for 3 months, we took care of him, and he finally walked out of the hospital, improved. It really made an impression on me. And I worked with people like this young health assistant, 19 years old, Buddhi Podel. Buddhi was just a health assistant, not a doctor, an eager young health assistant who trailed beside me to learn everything I said, felt like I was his guru, and really had a sense of teacher and student with him. I also met folks like these, Trevor and Patricia Strong from Ireland and Helen Houston from Canada, and I began to see my own life as a possibility of actually staying longer in Nepal. I was then a Christian, and I could see that maybe this was actually a career that I could make in Nepal, and began to then take step by step a little bit longer in the journey. I was posted back to Patan Hospital to work after I became a long-term missionary, and doors opened one after the other. You probably look at this picture and say, well, who's that guy with the umbrella? Why would he be showing this picture? That boy was named Nick. Nick came to Nepal, worked for a year, loved the country. I never met him. The people who I met were his parents. They came to Nepal after Nick died, wanting to set up a memorial. And that was another door that God opened for me and for us, was to actually work in an organization that supported remote hospitals right around the country of Nepal. We could be kind of a channel for God's love through these people who had lost a son to remote hospitals half a world away. And I did that until 2016. After 2016, I wound my way back to Patan Hospital, the first place I had worked. And so my journey was here, there, and another place, but it was always with the sense that God was opening these doors and leading me into this work. I'm just going to give you a quick snapshot, a little clip, film clip, of me now quite a bit older. I always say I went to Nepal a young man, and I'm leaving an old man. And this is what I did. Older, okay, fine. You don't want to draw a line, you just want to make it a continuum, okay? We're all older than we were yesterday. But this is what I've done the last 7 years, or this is one glimpse of it. So he's been in avocation 3 days. So we're hoping that that's making a difference. And our backup is urology, we're calling. Okay, great. He said, does he need IV fluids still? You need
From today I have stopped like.
Okay, that's the fever still. Okay. हाम्रो विचारमा ठीक हुन लाग्यो है पानी प्रशस्त पिउनुहोस् हामी यो निकाल्छौं है भोलि यो औषधि दिँदैछौं. So this is my life as an academic doctor, a teacher. I'm a professor at this medical school, or I was until July, And this is what we do when we teach and we take care of patients. We go to bedsides with a group of doctors, some very junior, some more senior, and we talk about the patient, we talk to the patient, and we make a plan. It's a kind of apprenticeship. Apprenticeship means working together with a senior doctor to learn your trade. And this is quite a fulfilling thing, and this is what I've done the last 7 years in Nepal. And also, life just takes these marvelous turns. Because this guy in the blue under my right arm on this side is Dr. Buddhi. And he became my senior, became my supervisor. So when I left Nepal, he was the leading rheumatologist in the country. And he was my boss 35 years later. And the man on the other side, Dr. Home Neopani. Where's the lady who I met who said, here she is. Dr. Home Neopani also worked with us in Nepal, but decided to come to the U.S. And by various turns in his life, wound up working at Upstate. And is this young lady's doctor at Upstate. So we were both there at Patna Hospital. So that's a little bit of a glimpse into my own journey and the journey you've made with me and with us. And Deirdre's going to take over and tell you from her perspective.
Good morning again, everybody. So as Mark said, we're talking about our own journeys and how we've ended up making this much longer journey in Nepal than any of us imagined, with your support. I'm originally from Ireland. I grew up there, I qualified there, and following my own kind of deeper commitment to the Lord during some difficult days in college, after working for a few years as a clinical dietitian in a hospital actually in the UK, I decided I would like to join up for mission service. I felt that more than a calling, it just kind of, I had the chance to do some short-term mission work in Mozambique, just 6 weeks on 2 different occasions. And I loved travel. I was interested in foreign stuff and different cultures. And I was a health worker, so it seemed like it could all fit together. As Mark said in his sermon, you know, a call doesn't have to mean stepping out into something really weird or very contrary to your own desires. You feel like God gives you certain gifts and things you like to do that he can then use. So I signed up with the Church Missionary Society. I was just talking to John and Matthew earlier. I am not a Methodist. I'm an Episcopalian. As they said, we're quiet. I like that. Anyway, and I signed up with them like as an organization and just said, okay, I'm a nutritionist, please, a dietitian, send me, I want to go overseas. And as Mark said, I was really hoping to go back to Africa. I didn't exactly articulate that, and they told me they were sending me to Nepal. And I had the same kind of idea of Nepal pretty much as when Mark asked you, what do you think of going to Nepal? I knew nothing about it. Mountains, cold. I had this image, literally maybe dark, like mountains, cloud, rain, dark. That's kind of how we in Ireland think of mountains. And I was not interested in going. And this is pretty much, Nepal is a lot of mountains. This is the kind of place that the work I did was trying to reach, really steep hillsides, scattered villages. It turned out to be quite different, and one of the most significant differences, which is lacking in this picture, and as Mark said, lacking in our impression of Nepal frequently, is the people. So I was sent to United Mission to Nepal, which was a non-denominational Christian organization that is located in Kathmandu and accepts missionaries from around the world and uses them in all sorts of development projects in Nepal. Because you can't go explicitly to Nepal as a missionary. Christians are very much in the minority, and they don't want overt Christian evangelism, especially by foreigners. So we all worked in development, and Mark was working in a hospital under UMN, and I was in a different location in Kathmandu, but still the UMN's headquarter office, working with their nutrition program. And we were trying to, Nepal has, as an underdeveloped country, has a big issue with malnutrition, especially amongst women and children, working to help UMN's different projects try and incorporate nutrition into their development work. And we did training with their staff. And we also ran our own projects out in quite remote areas where our staff would live. As I say, trying to work for years with women, children, communities to change the practices that were contributing to such bad malnutrition. So not doing just food aid or just admitting children to hospital to make them better, but actually working with communities. And I consider myself very fortunate because that meant that I really, I got to, although I was always based in Kathmandu and didn't live in the village like Mark did for a couple of years, I traveled to a lot of different districts, traveled with my colleagues, my Nepali colleagues. I was the only expatriate in that office. We spent a lot of time together, learned a lot of the language, and really got to experience the culture for myself. But probably, as Mark alluded to before, I was pretty young, pretty naive, and think, okay, I did Nepal, tick. Okay, now where's that map back to Africa? Kind of thinking along those lines. I got what I was looking for. I knew the country a little bit. I felt like maybe I'd done a little bit of stuff for it. I don't know. But then Mark and I met, and we got married. We met through the work of the hospital. Mark put a request to UMN head office for some nutrition input, and I was sent along because I was the one who had previously worked in a hospital rather than just communities. And we did some work together, did some more work together, and we got married. And you can fill in the gap yourself. And so Mark, obviously at that point, was very well established in Nepal, and so we started our marriage there. Started working there. I carried on with the same nutrition organization that actually became an independent not-for-profit out of the mission. They asked me to work for them as advisor. And that was quite amazing because honestly, those first 3 years were not that easy professionally. Working in community development rather than hospital work is completely different kind of job. And I'm not sure I did contribute that much, but staying with this same office, with the same leadership, a lady in the middle in the top photo is named Roshini. She was executive director of the organization, and she'd been the person in charge when it was under the mission. And you can see her, if you can spot her, she changes slightly. In all the offices, in all the photos, there's one or two other staff. We worked together for over 25 years. And you really get close with colleagues like that and really understand each other's strengths and weaknesses. You begin to work better together because you have a tiff, you get over it, you realize, well, I pressed that button and she pressed that button of mine, and we get on and we keep going. And that's quite an amazing thing to look back on now. I never would have thought I would stay with an organization for 25 years. So that was really a lesson for me to see actually how long it really takes to get under the skin also of a culture. You learn the language, you learn the basic kind of cultural behaviors, but you go on and on and on, and you go deeper and deeper. And even as we're leaving, you're still realizing things about the culture that you hadn't that was still new to us. You kind of go, oh, really? Oh, that's what they're thinking when they do that, you know. So, however, in the last 7 years, my job has changed a bit. As I said, community work was a very different job for me than hospital work, and I love hospital work. And this photo was taken just a week before I left Nepal, back in July. At the end of June, this photo was taken. And this is in Patton Hospital. And as Mark moved from his community work with the Simons back into working as a professor and teacher at Patton Hospital, that gave me a route into the hospital. It's a 700-bed tertiary care referral hospital, Patton Hospital in Kathmandu, one of the most well-known hospitals in the country. It has multiple specialties. You can have brain surgery there, you have dialysis for kidneys, you have, premature babies in intensive care. It's a very well-developed hospital. It had no nutrition care, no dietitians. So when I started there about 7 years ago, I was going in just kind of mainly focused on the kitchen, trying to help them think about what we could give to patients who weren't able to eat or were malnourished. In this photo taken a week before I left, there's a couple of things I want to point out. First of all, we're with a patient. So there is now a dietetic service to individual patients in Patton Hospital. This is Sashikala, the young woman in the bed. She's 18 years of age, and she came into the emergency room having seizures, fitting. She was brought in by her brother. She lived at home with her parents and her brother, her older brother, and her sister too, I think. And her brother brought her in this state. And the emergency room staff began to try and treat her fits and try and settle her down, and they couldn't get the seizures to stop, and they did some more tests, and they discovered that Sashikala had an unknown to her family pregnancy, and she was quite late on in it. And she was having these seizures because she had untreated hypertension of pregnancy, and she was critically ill, actually. And she got admitted to our intensive care unit, and she spent over 2 months in there. They did deliver a small baby, and the baby survived. But Sashikala has a brain injury, and we don't know what extent she's going to recover. And this is her out of ICU, stable, but still not, her brain is not functioning properly, and she's not fully unconscious, but she's not aware of anything going on. So the things in this picture I'd like to point out. Number one, Sashikala has now been 3 months in the hospital. You can't see great detail from here, but Sashikala remains well nourished at 3 months of being unable to speak or eat. And that's because we had a dietetic service. She has a nasogastric tube in her nose, which she would have had before there was a dietetic service, but she probably just would have had lentil soup, some gruel, some juice put down there, and she would have gradually wasted away with an inadequate diet. In Nepal, people can't afford the high-level feeds and ensures and things like that you would be fed in a hospital in Syracuse if you were unconscious. So we have a special feed from the kitchen that we put down that tube that provides all her nutrition, all her vitamins, everything, and keeps her in that state. The second thing was that just 2 days after this photo was taken, that NG tube was gone. Not because she suddenly recovered, but because we were able to advocate for her to have a very simple procedure in the hospital, which put a feeding tube directly into her stomach under her shirt, which we call a peg in the profession. And so she can look a lot more normal as her family take her home. You don't have to replace this tube every month. You just use it long term, and they can continue to feed her at home while we hope she begins to recover a little bit. The third thing in this picture is that there's a young woman beside me, Pratiksha. Pratiksha is a Nepali dietitian. As I mentioned before, when I started in the hospital, I was just kind of going along myself. They put me under health education. They didn't know what to do with a dietitian. They thought I would sit in the outpatients and encourage new mothers to breastfeed. I had a bit of a different idea than that. And I started in the kitchen. This is kitchen staff, people who cook rice and curry for staff and for visiting families. And we mainly focused on this special feed, which is equivalent to Ensure Plus, but we cook it in the kitchen and send it in bottles to the ward. Now, this was a good start, and you can see the young man in the photo, the kitchen staff. We had a good relationship. We had a lot of fun together. But really, a 700-bed with multiple specialties. You need a department. There should be, multiple dietitians in that hospital taking care of all these different illnesses and conditions. So we struggled for a while. I struggled for a while. The hospital gave me a couple of assistants in this health education department. They didn't really have interest in learning to be dietitians. It was quite difficult to see the way forward. We were not able to visit you in 2019 when we were home on our last furlough, but we were visiting churches down south in Pennsylvania, and we left a prayer request. Please pray that the hospital would see the need to hire qualified, trained Nepali dietetic staff to really take on this aspect of the hospital's work. And this is the answer to that prayer. So in the last 4 years, the hospital has one by one opened dietetic posts. 2 years ago, they formally established the Department of Nutrition and Dietetics, which I had the privilege of leading and mentoring these young, very enthusiastic dietitians. The profession is just taking off in Nepal. It's still not registered. Many hospitals are now appointing maybe one dietitian. We're the only hospital which has a whole department. And honestly, Prakriti, the woman on the right from me, the slightly taller woman, she took over from me as in charge of the department. And honestly, she and these other young people will be the leaders of dietetics in that country in the years to come of that profession. So that's an incredible privilege and very exciting thing to be part of, and so exciting to see their enthusiasm. I thought, I was going to have to drive this, but they were so excited at the opportunity the hospital gave them. They work late. As I say, this department should have about 10 staff if they were in the equivalent hospital here. And they're just so hardworking, so keen to learn the latest protocols, the latest research, and apply them straight directly into a hospital which is starting from nothing. So that's been very rewarding for me, and a wonderful answer to prayer from the churches being steadfast with us in that. So that's been the professional journey for me in Nepal. Of course, Mark and I undertook a very different but hugely significant journey as well with our family. This was our entire family life to this point, as the four of us has been in Nepal. We have not lived as a family outside of Nepal except for furloughs when we come and visit support churches. So Zachary is our Nepali baby on the left-hand side. Benjamin was actually born in St. Joe's here during a home assignment on the right-hand side. So we have a Nepali and an American child. But Benjamin was back in Nepal before 3 months of age, and they were both completely raised there. They went to school. These are each of their close to their first days of school in Nepal. And, you know, this has been a huge part of your support in prayer for this too. You all know it's not easy to raise kids anywhere in the world. But you know, to be sure to carry on and feel like every 3 years when we renewed our assignment with the Methodists, and does God still want us here? Is he opening doors for our work? Is he opening the right doors for our family? You know, you do worry about your children's education and their opportunities, and although we're called to sacrifice, even the most sacrificial people hesitate if they start to see impact on their children. And so we so appreciate your prayers for our family over the years. Our boys have thrived in Nepal. They've had their struggles like every kid in the world has had. But an example of how we really saw God coming through for us, this is Zachary, our eldest, and this is him leaving for college. Now, I don't know how you brought your kids to college. We expected the whole usual thing of driving up to the college with a car overladen with stuff that your kid wants, and big hugs, a lot of excitement, a lot of tears, weepiness. We were going to do this during 2020 when we should have been coming to visit you guys and update you. And we were going to drop Zach at college and hang around and visit churches, and we could check he was okay, because, I mean, he's coming from the other side of the world, never lived in the U.S., going to a U.S. college. So we wanted to make sure he was okay. We didn't want to be on the other side of the world when he started college. But guess where we were? We were. This is him at Kathmandu Airport, which had been closed at that point for 6 months and still was not open. He went out on World Food Program aid flight. We got him a seat on that. He flew out to Malaysia, on to Korea. Various typhoons and storms left him in Atlanta before he took his last flight into Philly to start at Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania. This is a boy who lived overseas all his life, but had never been on a plane on his own. So he's got his COVID mask and all the rest, and we couldn't go in the airport or anything with him. But so not the way you would choose to start your kid in college. But God was faithful. He went to Swarthmore. We decided during COVID, we were going crazy with him sitting at home on his phone. He was going crazy sitting at home. Okay, we're going to send him to college even though it's COVID. And off he went. God helped us with all the arrangements. And he's done really well. He's settled in there. He is starting his 4th year at his final year in Swarthmore in 3 weeks' time. He's at the back there. You can ask him later how he enjoyed the experience or not. Benjamin has just completed high school in Kathmandu. These are his close friends who are on the student council. Benjamin and the girl on the left in the blue dress were head of student council, and this is them just preparing right before they give their speeches at graduation. And he too had a wonderful time in high school in Nepal, and he is heading to start at Haverford College in a couple of weeks' time down in Pennsylvania. And so part of the reason for, our boys have been a huge part of our lives in Nepal. Of course, having family, living real life in the country, as opposed to just being a visitor, people come alongside you, you come alongside local people in that experience too. This is again Roshni. This is Benjamin when he was small, obviously visiting my office. That's Roshni in the pink, who was the director of the program. You might not know it from this photo, but this is my farewell. But look how besotted they are with my boys. Rita on the right-hand side, she has a son who's right between my two boys' age. So, you know, you in the office and you're talking about your kids and the different challenges of raising kids. And here they are, brought up with the help of your prayers. And we're so grateful for that. We know Nepal has shaped our lives indelibly, and we wait to see how, you know, their roots are very much Nepali roots, not American roots, and how it will direct them in their lives. We wait to see, and we continue to ask your prayers for them, especially perhaps right at this time for Benjamin as he starts in American college. He's a Nepali kid going to American college, and there's a big jump for him.
Coming down the home stretch of our journey, we are in a church in Nepal that is a Nepali Christian church. It's not a Methodist church. In Nepal, there's only about 3 or 4% of the people who are Christian. And so the more important thing is, do you follow Jesus than whether you're Methodist or Presbyterian or Catholic or what you are. And our role in the church is not as pastors or as founders of the church. It's founded and pastored by Nepalis. And this slide gives an idea of kind of our relationship with people there. They've had their arms around us. They've supported us as we've supported them. This happens to be 2 people in the church. One is a boy who got an opportunity to go to college here in the U.S., and his name is Benjamin. And another is a boy who didn't have that same opportunity, had to apply to become a Gurkha soldier, a mercenary soldier for the British. There still are Nepalis who go overseas and work for other countries as mercenary soldiers, and his name is Biso. So our church can be shown right here. This is the 100 people, 150 people in our church, most of them younger than me, and pastored by the man, well, you can't really quite see it, but he's in there somewhere, who's about 20 years younger than me. And it's a vibrant, growing church, a church that does some social work, but it's more interested in bringing more believers into the church. So if a young person turns up in the church, they're focused on that boy or girl, man or woman, to try to cultivate them coming back. Something we all can learn from the churches in Nepal. So our journey has been a journey which I don't think anyone here made physically to Nepal, but very much you were with us, you put us there. This is the end of our journey in Nepal. This is our last term has ended in Nepal, and we're now visiting churches to say thank you, to ask for your prayers for what comes next, but it won't. The next step won't be in the Himalayas, in the high mountains of Nepal. It might be in the high mountains of New Hampshire. And as we have in the past, we put before you prayer requests because we really cherish your interest, your money that you put into us, which keeps us there. But more than that, we cherish your prayers. And so I'll leave you with 4 prayer requests. First is for the health institutions that we've left behind. Patna Hospital, that medical department will do quite well without me. But the 2 nutrition departments that Deirdre worked for in community, it's called NPCS, and in the hospital, that new dietetics department, are really just going to take some new steps without her being there. So please pray for them. Secondly, pray for the church. Our church is called Ananta Shalom, which is eternal peace Church is the name of it, and for the Greater Nepali Christian Church, which you are all connected to through prayer, through God's love right around this piece of material that we call the earth. Thirdly, for Zach and Benjamin, as they continue to discover a new home during college. Not an easy thing to leave your home. It's a harder thing to come to the U.S. and have people say, welcome home. And you feel in your heart, well, actually my home was over in Kathmandu, so I have to adjust here. And Zach has taken big steps in that direction. Benjamin is just taking his first steps. And then finally, pray for Deirdre and I. We feel called into new mission work where I'll be a local licensed pastor in Lebanon, New Hampshire, which is actually just a few miles from the place where I was a medical student at Dartmouth 40 years ago. So please pray for us. Thank you for continuing to remember us, even though we're not your missionaries sent to Nepal anymore. And yeah, thanks for walking with us. So we'll all come up and try to answer any of your questions. Deirdre and I are the least bashful of the crew. I'm probably the least bashful, embarrassingly so to the others. Yeah, not yet, but sometimes feel that way. So any questions for any of the four of us? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How long did it take you to become able to do that?
Well, it's all stages, isn't it? I mean, to be able to say hello to someone, how are you, to get directions in the street is one thing. Even in medical also, you can start to get your way into it, but to get the nuances down, to be able to really converse well, it probably takes better part of a term, 2 or 3 years. And medicine, there's few endeavors that cultivate that better than medicine, because your communication is your foundation for whether you can do your work or not. Yeah, but we all speak, and these guys speak with such pure Nepali that when Benjamin calls up a taxi by, the local Uber type thing, and the taxi turns up, it won't take him immediately because they said, no, we were talking to a Nepali on the phone. Who is this guy? Yes?
Well, I'm studying political science and art history.
And I'm thinking to go into journalism or film studies.
Yes?
I have to say I found the transition quite smooth. Definitely COVID was a big, bump to deal with, as it was for everybody. And for a lot of people, a lot more difficult than, I had it. I think my experience growing up and going to an international school meant that transition was a lot easier. I was quite accustomed to the flexibility of moving between cultures and different ways of life. Honestly, one of the biggest things was the food. When I got home for Christmas break, I said to my mom, I love your cooking. I'll be home tomorrow night. Tonight I got to go to my Nepali friend's house. I really need good Nepali food right now.
So what is Nepali food?
It's quite adjacent to Indian food. It's very rice focused, and then lentil soup, curried vegetables, some curried meats, often some sort of spicy, sour, salty pickle on the side. With various variations of that.
So you're supported and connected to the United Methodist Church, but
Yeah. So we are employees of global ministries, and our paycheck would go into our U.S. bank account. And then we are assigned to institutions in Nepal. We must have a placement, we must have a manager on the ground. So our managers were Nepalis in these institutions. And then we also have a global ministries regional kind of manager who keeps an eye on us HR-wise from their point of view. So professionally, we answer most of the time to these guys, to our Nepali colleagues. Global Ministries is United Methodist, yeah.
So that basically, the funds that churches like yours send to the United Methodist Church Global Ministries get pooled and then go into the support of missionaries like us. So that's it's not direct one-to-one, but it goes into a pool, and then that money, goes to us, and that keeps us going there. Yeah.
How many churches in the States were supporting you?
We tended to have. We asked for churches to be kind of in a region, so we basically spanned from Maine down to Maryland, as far west as Ohio, centered in Pennsylvania and New York. We tended to run pretty regularly about 50 churches that supported us enough to warrant and regularly enough to warrant a visit. So we would come on furlough. This time also we have a kind of tour of 50 or so churches. And then we have several, 4 or 5 that we'll visit in Ireland also at the end of this time. Yes, Bob?
Yeah, I'm from Dublin. Yeah. Right. Okay, nice.
You were saying that maybe 3 or 4% of the people are Christians. But what are the major religions in Nepal? What are the popular ones?
Nepal is by vast majority Hindu. The second religion would be Buddhism. But in Nepal, Buddhism and Hinduism are very mixed. There are some people who would consider themselves pure Buddhists, but they cross over a lot. And then there's a small minority of Muslims, especially the closer you get to India. And then there's the Christians. So the Muslim and the Christian population would be about equal. Maybe a few more Muslims. The Christian population is growing, and I'm not sure. I think the Islamic population is stable, those communities.
No, I'd say the 2 things you mentioned, attending and practicing your religion there, even as a foreigner, is safe to do. You cross the line slightly if you begin to preach or teach Sunday school. Yeah, that would be then you would definitely be on that side of the line. And if you tried to start a church as a foreigner, then you would really be at risk. Some get away with it. Some people have been thrown in jail, but more commonly you're just blacklisted and sent out of the country. And Nepali friends also, by the rules of the country, are at risk if they evangelize, if they convert people from Hinduism to Christianity. So some of our colleagues, friends, have been put in jail for that. And it's a strong Hindu culture, and that washes over into the government itself. Any last question for Benjamin? He's keen to say a few things. See, I told you, by being the guy who's least bashful, I'm the guy they always get angry at. There you go.
If you learn to appreciate the grace like a Whopper or a Big Mac, even though it's not the pound.
Well, you heard earlier in the presentation, my mom is a nutritionist, so I can probably count on one hand the number of times I've been to a fast food restaurant in this country. So.
He knows what a burger is, let me tell you that. Does that boy look like he's never eaten a burger?
Is that not a Whopper? Okay. Yes.
Are there McDonald's or any fast food in the town?
Because it's a Hindu majority country, cows are sacred in the Hindu religion, they're gods. So there's no McDonald's or Burger King or beef product fast food chains, but there is KFC and there is Pizza Hut. So there's those two, yeah. Is there? Baskin Robbins, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you all for your attention through a long morning. It's been a delight for us to be here, and please keep praying for us. And Pastor Nate, thank you.